Now look, I know there's gonna be so many people in this comment section that immediately just say, yes, the game has fallen off, yes, the game is dead, blah blah blah, but I want you to hear me out, right? I think, honestly, me personally, I think that Honkai Star Rail overall as a game has gotten better since it first came out, but if we're talking from an objective standpoint, I truly don't think that the game has gotten either better or worse. This is because the game has changed so much from 2023, from version 1.0, to the point where I don't think it's fair to quantify whether the game overall has gotten better or worse. There are aspects of the game that have improved, some that have significantly degraded, and I want to talk about all of this in today's video, starting off with the cons. Now, we know there's a lot of cons in Honkai Star Rail, right? Power creep, right? Rampant, especially in the early days, specifically in 2.x, has slowed down now, but still nonetheless, it is absolutely present. HP inflation, certain archetypes, units, and team comps are being shielded like no other, especially now with 3.7 for Pure Fiction, to the point where the Pure Fiction units that we've had before are not meta this patch. Anyways, right, we know there's a lot of cons, but let's talk about what actually makes these bad. Now, power creep and HP inflation are crazy, empty buzzwords for the most part, realistically. A lot of people who say this stuff don't really know what they're talking about. Now, power creep definitely prevalent, but like I said, it slowed down earlier. What's more consistent in the endgame that makes you struggle using your older units is the archetype shilling, right? You can have an absolutely cracked out Firefly team and build, but if the enemies have 700% increase in toughness bar inflation, there's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately, and this is what we're seeing with so many other units. There will be dot shilling, there will be caster shilling, and some of these are worse than others, but the point is, when a specific and usually extremely niche archetype gets shilled, everybody else falls off. Everybody else struggles to combat this kind of shilling, and this is what makes the endgame in Honkai Star Rail like half of the time just not fun at all. For example, when you're fighting the dot manta rays in the endgame, there's not a lot you can do if you have somebody like a Finon, or god forbid somebody like a Jinglu, Imbiber Lune, Acheron, some of the older DPSs. You just gotta brute force that and hope it'll work, twin. So yes, in that sense, the endgame has absolutely fallen off. I think personally Honkai Star Rail's endgame and meta peaked either when there was only 10 floors in MOC or when they first came out with Pure Fiction. But otherwise, Honkai Star Rail, as different as it is, still has the same kind of updates and format as it's always had. For example, people like to glaze the early days for one thing, for the quote-unquote quality of life that we had during this era, when you have to keep in mind, number one, a lot of the quality of life in question was really just foundation building, right? Like the increased stamina cap, Pure Fiction being introduced, the simulated universe modules. Another thing is, we still get the same kind of quality of life. We're no longer getting game-breaking systems, at least not as often. We did get currency wars, anomaly arbitration, but these are not game modes that Hoyoverse can consistently pump out for Honkai Star Rail, right? A lot of the quality of life that we actually do get in this era is just that, genuine quality of life, and not full-on new systems like what they were introducing back in 1.x, which, if we're being realistic here, 1.x wasn't even like a fully released product. That was like an open beta, and in my opinion, 2.0 is when the game actually started to become a proper game. Honkai Star Rail released with 1, maybe 2 endgame modes, if we count simulated universe. Compared to the 5 or 6 we have now, we exponentially have more endgame now than what we had back then. Which leads me on to my next point. Honkai Star Rail now isn't even meant to be played the same as how it was back then. Back in the day, Honkai Star Rail was this playing on the train, 5 minutes a day kind of thing, and then you go play Genshin for 6 hours and you explore the world of Teyvat. Nowadays, Honkai Star Rail has reached a point where you fall under one of two categories. Unfortunately, there's no middle ground. You either one, play it casually and you end up falling behind in the meta and the endgame and everything, or on the other hand, you grind the game to the point where you no longer have anything to do, and for 5 out of the 6 weeks for a given patch, you have no content to do other than dailies and endgame grind. It's no longer just this casual play it every now and then, play it before you go to sleep kind of game that it was like back in 1.0. And people don't like that, right? The same can be said about the story. Back in 1.0 and honestly just 1.x entirely, the story was just kind of all over the place. It was super casual, most of it was filler, and the stuff that wasn't filler was pretty happy-go-lucky stuff. Nowadays, we have a full-on narrative that's actually unfolding with every patch. And again, people don't like that. Now, if you've noticed where I'm getting at here, the game and how it's played has fundamentally changed. The story, again, fundamentally has changed. Endgame has compounded many systems over the last few years. Honkai Star Rail is a different game as of version 3.7 and 3.8, as opposed to how it was back in version 1.0. It appeals to an entirely different audience than what was initially captivated back in version 1.0 and 1.1, and honestly just 1.x overall. The people and the masses grew to love the silliness of version 1.5 and 1.6's stories, right? Think of Ethereum Wars, think of A Foxy and Tale of the Haunted. People love these kind of events, these kind of stories, happy-go-lucky, goofy, you know, endgame, 1 or 2 systems, throw in any unit and they can max star with your eyes closed and one hand up your butthole, like digging around for gold. People like that about the game. Now it's different. Honkai Star Rail now honestly just reflects what Honkai Impact is like nowadays. Super intensive endgame and meta, power creep absolutely prevalent. Archetype coverage kind of matters, but not really, but at the same time it's pretty ambiguous overall. Heavy emphasis on the story and narrative. Like I said, completely different game overall than how it was back in the launch. So has Honkai Star Rail changed? Has it gotten worse? For the first question, yes. The second one, again, I don't think it's fair to say objectively whether the game has improved or gotten worse. Like I said throughout the entirety of this video, everything has changed. Even the exploration itself. Think back to what the maps were like back in your Relo 6 Shenzhou, right? We had 8 chests per subregion, 7 chests per subregion. Nowadays, we have like 30 on average per subregion. Even the names of the subregions themselves in a given world these days has gotten longer. That's how much has changed in Honkai Star Rail. So if you wanted to ask me, a veteran of Honkai Star Rail, I think the game 100% in my eyes, in my personal opinion, has gotten better in almost every way, shape, and form. We're still getting the quality of life that we got back in the early days. Character designs are still there. The story, in my opinion, is a lot more just straight up better, right? I wanted to think up of a clever, way to phrase it. I just think it's better now. I prefer the emotional intensity of Amphorius compared to something like Eurilo 6, which is just small, like short but sweet kind of thing. But some people like the latter. Some people would prefer Eurilo over Amphorius. So if you're wondering if 4.0, aka 8.0 Star, is going to bring back the early days of Honkai Star Rail, it won't. Unfortunately, straight up, it just will not. I think this new format with Honkai Star Rail, where there's a lot of emphasis on the story and meta, is going to be here to stay. That being said, Genshin Impact still is pretty casual overall. Honkai Nexus Anima, the next big game from Hoyoverse, seems like it's going to recapture that kind of 1.0 essence that Honkai Star Rail had. Casual, could use any kind of unit kind of thing. That's the vibe I get from Honkai Nexus Anima. I know a lot of people watching this video who like the early days of Star Rail more than, current era, are going to like Honkai Nexus Anima. I hope you have fun with that game if you choose to try it out. Honkai Star Rail I don't think has gotten worse. My opinion, it's gotten better, but that is completely 100% subjective. I want to hear what other people think, right? Do you think that Star Rail is better now? Do you prefer this new gen era where everything's all about story and meta as opposed to before? I think honestly a lot of you just have rose tinted glasses, if I'm being completely honest, because some people say that Ethereum Wars and Foxy and Tail and the Critter event just had a special charm to it, and I get that, right? Those 1.x events had a charm to it that a lot of events these days don't have, but we still get those same kind of main events that are a little goofy, have their own kind of main story. It's not every patch, I get that, but we still do get that quite often. 3.5, for example, had the restaurant event with the Chrysos Airs, the Chrysos Maze Grand Restaurant, I believe. That one was pretty reminiscent, in my opinion, of something in early 1.x or late 1.x, right? 3.6 had the Jomas's event, also pretty reminiscent, in my opinion. 3.7 didn't really have anything too crazy, and I don't know what events are coming in 3.8 because for some reason the leakers are gatekeeping that. But you get what I mean, right? A lot of stuff from 1.x has changed, but at the same time, a lot of stuff are still pretty prevalent. So that's about it. I got nothing else to say, so I'll see y'all. Goodbye.